Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd, and you are not, although maybe a few of you are, but most of you are not, and that's a good thing because you're here to listen to me talk. And I'm so excited that I had to keep myself from drinking a third cup of coffee because, well, you just wouldn't be able to take it if I had. Today, we are talking about what's new in version 18. Now, this isn't what's new in PracticeMaster version 18. This isn't what's new in Tabs version 18. This is what's new in version 18. This is the Paul goes as fast as he can and tries in as much detail as possible to explain every single feature of version 18. Without further ado, let's take a look. After pressing the magic buttons, see if I remember what the magic buttons are. Leanne, do you know what the magic buttons are?
No.
No, that's all right. I guess I do. I just have to remember them. Let's talk about version 18. Now, the very most important thing to know about version 18 is how to find out what's new. Now, you don't have to have version 18 to do what I'm about to show you. If in any version of STI software, well, I suppose they added this functionality, this help what's new feature, maybe in 15. So if you got a really old version, okay. But in virtually any version of STI software, if you click on Help and What's New, you will be taken to this. And then you'll have an option to go to the What's New web page. And from there, you'll notice we're now on in a Chrome window looking at the Tabs3.com site. And from there, you'll be able to click on the What's New list. Now, for those of you who may not have that functionality within your software, I'll just show you that also, if you go to support.tabs3.com, there will be a What's New link right here. And that will ultimately take you to the same place where you can get to this What's New in version 18 list. Okay? Now, I am going to go through this whole list. I do have copies of every piece of software in version 18 open. If need be, I'll jump into them to explain something or to elaborate on something. But we're just going to go through this list together. As I said, there's a lot that's changed. I have a half an hour, and I have not had my third cup of coffee. So I'm going to try to explain in a calm and collected manner everything that's new. So you'll notice that immediately I'm going to go right past the highlights because the highlights only summarize what I'm going to show you in great detail. And so here we go. Tabs 3. We'll start with Tabs 3 and then move on to other packages. This is huge. Period-based reports are gone. Date-based reports, every report in Tabs is now date-based. A period-based report is a report that requires that you move the month from one month to another. A lot of times these are called bucket reports. So think of it as until I advance the month from December to January or from January to February, every time entry that I make, everything I do that would affect this certain report is going in the January bucket. And as soon as I advance the month from January to February, even if I don't do that till February 8th, and even if some people enter some time, some February time during that period when I haven't advanced it, it's going into the January bucket. That's period-based, that's bucket-based, that's gone. These 5 reports used to be period-based. They are no, or I'm sorry, it used to be period-based. They are no longer. Along the way, a lot of other reports, all the other reports have been switched to date-based. These were the 3 that hold on. Now, what that means is a lot of other things have changed. No longer do you advance your month. You can set the current reporting month. You can say, I know it's January, but I'm still printing my December report, so I'm going to set my current reporting month to December. And when I'm ready to start printing January reports, I'm going to set my current reporting month of January. But you don't have to move the bucket forward. You don't have to change the January bucket to the February bucket. You don't have to worry about people entering things when it's February and you haven't changed from the January bucket. Everything's date-based. If somebody enters February time in January, it's still February time. If somebody enters January time in February, it's still January time. If somebody enters February time in February, it's still February time. It doesn't matter where your buckets are. There are no more buckets. It doesn't matter anything except what date is used in the transaction. That's huge for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. I won't go into details. I haven't had my third cup of coffee. Therefore, when you undo statements, no longer do we have month to adjust because all reports are date-based. It used to be that when you undid a statement, you had to adjust productivity totals. Don't have to adjust them anymore. We don't care. There are no more periods. There used to be something called change beginning reporting month. It's no longer necessary. Your system doesn't care what your fiscal year is, what your beginning reporting month is, because everything is date-based. If you want to print a report that shows November of 2015 through October of 2016, print a report that includes those dates. You don't have to call it your year's report anymore, even though you've got a weird fiscal year. Doesn't matter. Okay, enough about that. Printing receipts. There is now a receipt function and a receipt button when you are entering payments into tabs. And as you'll see in a minute, this also applies to trust account. So you tell it what type of receipt you received, and now you hit this button, and it'll just print a simple one-page receipt. You used to, if you've ever done this, and somebody came up to your front counter and gave you a check for $50 or gave you cash for $50, you either had to have a receipt book there, or you had to print a statement that showed that payment. Nuts. Now you just use this print receipt button here, and it happens. Fee recap. We've always had fee recap in tabs. In a minute, we'll see that we now have it in PracticeMaster, but don't tell anybody. We've always had this in tabs. It's very cool. A lot of people like it. It's why up until now, a lot of people have insisted that their timekeepers enter their time in tabs instead of PracticeMaster. But now we have a total. We've always had billable. I hate the way this keeps coming in here. I'm sorry, but I've got my PDF open and this black thing keeps coming in here. It's now a good time to tell you that I hate computers. We've always had, as you know, or maybe you don't know, the fee recap, when you pop it up in your time entry window in tabs, shows you a summary of the time that you have entered for that day, and you can move around to different days, and you can move around to different timekeepers. And it's always shown you a total of how much billable and non-billable time you've entered, and you've always been able to double-click on that day and see all the transactions, but now you get a total. So you don't have to mentally add, okay, I've been here 6 hours and I've logged 5. Okay, good, I'm fine. Now you get this total instantly. There's a new task code summary on statements, and therefore we've added the ability to add a heading for that. I'm not going to go into any detail. If you do task-based billing, you can now do a task code summary on your statements, and you have the ability to define what that summary is headed with, the line before it says. Default bill to records description. Have you ever seen this? I'm going to actually jump over. This is one of my pet peeves. You go into the client screen, and over on setup, now I'm going to have to figure out which tab. Now that's another one of my pet peeves. I never know where to go. This used to be called default billing address. I think that's what it was. Is that what it says over here? It used to be called default billing address for this matter. And so people look at that and go, where's that coming from? What does that mean? How do I set that? How does that affect me? Now, it merely tells you that it's the address shown in the address tab. That's always what it's meant. They just changed the words so people won't freak out when they see this and say, default billing address, where does that come from? Leanne has a question.
Well, actually, Marcel has a question. And the question is, Paul used time as an example. Does this apply to statements as well? Meaning whatever date you use on the statement, then that's the reporting date it will use.
Yes, and that's always been true since maybe version 16. It's always been very important what date you use on the statement. If you print a statement, well, no, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. A statement date affects the ledger record and how payments are applied and things like that, how finance charge is calculated. But the date of the transactions is what's being used for the productivity information. So if we print a bill in February and it's really January's bill, and instead of changing the statement date to January 31st, we just leave it at February something, February 7th, let's say, That doesn't mean that the time that appears on that January bill, which we're probably cutting off at January 31st, is February time. It's still January time. It does mean that the statement is a February statement, which we sometimes recommend to people that, depending on what their needs are, that the last day of the month actually be what's used for the statement date. But that's neither here nor there. I think what Marcel is asking is, does the date of the transaction, is that what affects the productivity reports? And that is true. We also have new ProPay. If you do credit card processing with Tabs, you used to use something called PayFuse. Now you use ProPay. And so that has a couple things. There's a much simpler self-assessment questionnaire that's used for the compliance. If you've ever used this, if you've used the Tabs transaction credit card processing, there's this long process at the end of the year to get certified to be compliant for all the rules that you have for accepting credit cards and putting them into the software. It now processes e-checks. So instead of just processing credit cards, you can also directly debit from somebody's checking or savings account. You can process additional payments without having to re-enter the credit card or bank account information. This is huge. If you've used it before, you know what a pain this was before. Now it holds on to it. And you can also access your ProPay merchant account reports directly from Tabs3. There's a menu option. You go in and all your reports are there. And it actually, I've seen this at a couple of clients, it takes you to a website where you see the reports, but you can access them and tell it, I want these reports directly from within Tabs3. Fee and cost entry. Oh, I'm sorry, we're on the PracticeMaster changes. Now this is the huge one. It is for me, and it is for a lot of my clients. Some of my clients have Tabs3 be the central point for an attorney or a timekeeper to enter time because of the functionality of the fee entry window in that program. For instance, in PracticeMaster, the rate used to end up showing up as 0 until you saved the fee entry. That was a huge problem for many people because the attorneys would go, my rate's not 0, it's supposed to be $275, I think. Well, it wasn't. Maybe it was supposed to be $265, but they put in $275 because they were scared when it said 0. So in many firms, we've actually taken this out. We can put it back now because when we tell it what client it is, it will instantly go and look up that client's and that matter's rate for that particular timekeeper. And therefore, when we change this or we change this, it will instantly ask us if we want to recalculate. We now also have the ability to show the rate code and the sales tax. The rate code is how it's getting the rate, and the sales tax is whether or not that particular transaction is taxable. Okay, those things have always been in Tabs3's fee entry window. They are now in PracticeMaster's. And so for many of my clients, this means we can keep the timekeepers, i.e. the attorneys, out of the billing software where a lot of administrative people are uncomfortable having them go, although we can lock it down so all they can do is enter fees, and keep them in PracticeMaster, which is where I feel and many of my clients feel the entry should be done. So now we have this new fee recap window in PracticeMaster. Same window we've always had in Tabs. Now it's in PracticeMaster. Huge, huge, huge difference. This is the fee recap window. And then we've also added, and this is the sub window that I mentioned before when we were talking about it in Tabs. It's always been there in Tabs. This is a sub window when you double click on a day that says, well, here's the time that you entered so far for that particular day. Okay. And they've added some new fee recap reports also to the report writer in PracticeMaster. To be quite frank, these aren't nearly as exciting as having that button right there during fee entry that pops up this fee recap that can be drilled down to this daily list of your transactions. Many of these fee recap reports have already been there. We've written a couple. We've actually made them available free to our clients simply because we thought they should have been there to begin with. And they've changed them, they've enhanced them, but my feeling is this is a much better way to recap your hours in PracticeMaster. Matter Manager. I had somebody already write me and say, this has changed his life. It used to be that when you clicked on the Matter Manager, it would pop open the Matter Manager and take you to the most recently open matter that you had open in the Matter Manager. Well, that's not really where you want to go. And if you wanted to switch, if you switched and wanted to go to another client, it wouldn't open a new window with that client. It would simply take you to that screen and change the client. Now, I'm going to show you this over in PracticeMaster. When you pull up a matter, there's an item over here called Matter Manager. So if you're looking at a matter in the client screen, which is where a lot of people work, but they also like to go to the Matter Manager, we now have this link that will open up the Matter Manager and take us there. It won't take us to the Matter Manager because you've always had this too somewhere, the Matter Manager, there it is. It won't take us to the Matter Manager for some other client. It'll take us to the Matter Manager for the client we're looking at in the client screen. And if I open up the Matter Manager for that client, and then go back here, I didn't test this, I think this is true, and say I want the Matter Manager for this client, yeah, it takes me back to the Matter Manager without opening up a whole bunch of different windows. So now I no longer have the expanding windows problem with this Matter Manager and this Matter Manager and this Matter Manager. It takes me back to the Matter Manager, but not for who I had on it before, for this client. So whether I get out of here or not and just go back, if I choose a different client, it'll open up the already open Matter Manager and take me to that client. Very cool. And by the way, just so you know, I have that same client that told me how much this changed his life and how happy he was with this. He has described the Matter Manager, especially the all activity view, as being, come on, there we go, as being Facebook for a matter. And I think that's a brilliant description of how the Matter Manager all activity view works. It shows you everything, fees, documents, calendar entries, notes, emails, everything that you've put into PracticeMaster for that client, kind of in one long chronological view, and as he calls it, Facebook for matters. Okay, I'm starting to ramble, so Leanne's going to be over here pointing at her watch every once in a while to keep me on track. If you use synchronization in between PracticeMaster and Outlook or between PracticeMaster and Exchange, you understand how hard it is prior to version 18 to know in one place all the different settings for all the different people that synchronize. You have to go to their machine and say, what are your settings? What are your settings? What are your settings? Not anymore. There's a new report that summarizes it all from one place. So no longer do you have to look at each individual user's login from their machine like you used to find out what people's synchronization settings are set to. Now you can run a report that shows you a lot of the options and how they're set, so you can scan it without having to go to their machine. There's a new feature in Outlook 2013 called a quick reply. We now support the ability to create a journal, calendar, and fee record via the quick reply window. That wasn't there before because it's a new feature, and the plugin, the toolbar in Outlook didn't go that far. Now it does. Document management. When configured for automatic naming, whenever a document management record is saved, PracticeMaster now updates the document name and location. Didn't used to do that. So if something had changed or something had happened, it wasn't keeping that in sync. Now it does. The form designer. I'm not going to go into a great deal, and Leanne's going to make sure to stop me if I do, because I'm very excited about this, and I think Leanne is too. But most of our clients don't use the form designer. Most of our clients have us do their form designer work. The form designer is where you tell it how you want to lay out the screens for all the files in PracticeMaster. And so we've added the ability to have magnetic snaps and snapping to grid and equalize horizontal and vertical spacing within there. It used to be a pain to get things to line up. Now it's not. That's all I'm going to say. If you're interested in this because you're nerdy like me and you've been in the form designer, then I recommend that you come here and read this whole section. Most of our clients don't use the form designer, so I'm going to skip right by. Many people didn't know this was happening before. It's been fixed, but when I tell people about it, they say, oh, well, I didn't know it didn't do it that way before. If I have a recurring entry, if I go into PracticeMaster and go to the calendar and create a new entry, and I'm just going to go to my monthly calendar, I'm going to double click on this day, I'm going to add a new entry, and I'm going to make it recurring. I'm not even going to save it, but I'm just going to make it recurring. And I'm going to say I want it all the way up until February 2nd of 2022. I want a weekly thing that happens every 1 week on Monday. And I have just scheduled this one entry here to be recurring for every Monday up until a certain point. These are all the dates that it is scheduled for. That's no big deal. That's been there. Well, maybe it's a big deal. Maybe you didn't know it. Now you do. What's new is that when I hit save, it's always gone out and said, hey, let me check for conflicts. And you've seen this conflicting activities window that I'm about to show you from the What's New list. But what didn't happen before is it was only checking before for this date. It wasn't looking at all these dates. Come on, take me there. It wasn't looking at all these dates for a conflict. Now it does. So now the calendar conflict, which I think used to be called the conflicting entries window, now the calendar conflict window will show me all of my conflicts regardless of whether they're for that original date or one of the recurring dates that is back behind the scenes. If you've ever used automatic email notification, it's a feature that you can turn on to automatically notify people when their calendar entries are added or changed or deleted. It will now include your Outlook signature. It didn't before. So it would create this automatic email from you to whoever saying, hey, this entry was changed from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, but you'd have to reinsert manually your Outlook signature. Now that's done automatically. The graphical calendar now has a new option for printing called Agenda. Agenda, unlike a calendar that looks like this, you can print this. You can print something that looks just like that, with or without these tasks. But the new Agenda is more of a straight text view. Let's see if we can print this real quick. There we go. That's an agenda view. So it shows you different days, different times, and who's doing what based on what you told it, you know, what people, what activities, whatever you told it to include. So rather than being a graphical view like this, it's more of a textual view. It still looks graphical in nature, but it's more of a text-oriented view. Another thing that's changed, and I've always hated this, the calendar entries that exceed the space available on a daily grid are now printed on a subsequent page, okay? So if you're not using the new agenda view, which is a way to get around the fact that when you print a monthly calendar, there's only so much space in each grid. If you instead want that monthly grid-based view, when the daily activities exceed the space in the grid, they now get printed on a subsequent page as addendums, if you will. Workflows. You can now bold, italicize, underline, and strike through in memo type fields in a workflow. And you can start an email in a workflow that now contains the signature line. It's been removed in the past. And workflows will no longer create email notifications or e-notes for non-login or inactive users. That's huge to people like me and Leanne and Mary Jo. If you're not creating workflows, then you're probably thinking, huh, what the heck is he talking about? ScanSnap. If you have a ScanSnap, we've added a new plugin for the ScanSnap that shows a PracticeMaster button so that if you're saving documents to PracticeMaster, you can do so directly from ScanSnap. You've always been able to save those to PracticeMaster, but you had to do it from Windows Explorer once that scan document got into your computer. Now, directly from ScanSnap, you just hit the PracticeMaster button, and it'll go right into PracticeMaster's document management. Moving on to General Ledger, journal entries. We now have the ability to autofill. So if I start to type a description and I type P, it'll pop up a list of all the descriptions that I've ever used that start with P, and just like autofill in many other tabs and PracticeMaster fields, as I start to type, if I type PAY, then of course only these will show, and as if I type PAYM, only these will show, and it will just narrow down to a list that I can select from, or I can just keep typing. Very cool for journal entry. The pre-fill feature now populates all journal entries in a transaction based on previous transactions with or without amounts, depending on whether or not they've always had the same amount or they've always been different. So if I start to create a transaction, it's going to guess what I'm doing and pre-fill it. It doesn't mean I can't overwrite it, but 9 times out of 10, it's the same transaction that I'm entering. And huge, huge, huge for things like payroll, for just about anything that you're creating a manual general ledger entry for. Because most of those are there's usually just a couple things that you do that for, and now it's going to remember what they were. You can also now subtotal transactions and batches in the journal entry window by selecting this drop-down and selecting what it is that you want to subtotal by. Account information program, you can add journal entries via the journal entries tab of the account information program. So if you're in the account information program, you can directly add a journal entry. You just have to go into the journal entry screen. Account information report. If you're in, let's say, general ledger, and you're in the account information window, so you pull up a certain account. This is the account information window. Or maybe it's not. I may not be in the right place. Hold on. There we go. You can see all sorts of cool things. You have a balances, you have a budgets, and you have a journal entries tab where you can see all the journal entries and what the balances have been and what the budgets have been. Now we have the ability to print that. So if I go back to my list, we have the ability to print from the balances, budgets, and journal entries tabs reports based on what's showing there. So now this was new recently, and I didn't get back to, yeah, I did. So here's the account information screen or window with all this cool information. I didn't select anything that has, I didn't select anything that had any balances. Let's see if I can try this one. Account information. So you can see all the balances, you can see all the journal entries, you can specify what period, you can see the budgets if there are any, and now you can print that just by using the print button. So before that information was there, but it was just a look and see, not a print sort of thing. Now you can print it. All reports in GL, and you'll see this carries through to a couple other places as well, now have a date range selector that makes it easy to select things like current month, current quarter, current year, prior month, prior quarter, prior year. We have now the ability to specify multiple accounts. I don't know if you are familiar with the fact that you could do a range before, but if the range wasn't exactly, if the accounts you wanted to print weren't all in one row, it didn't matter. Now you can say, well, this one down here, this one down here, this one down here, these 4 accounts that are totally spread out throughout my chart of accounts, I want to include in the report because we now have that selected. Multiple ranges of departments, sort in account order, chart of accounts order or account number order, and simplified how the date ranges are saved, meaning if I say something like current year or current quarter, and then I save it, it doesn't take that current quarter. My current quarter here would be January 1 through March 31st, 30th, I don't know, the end of March. And so if I selected current quarter and saved it, it's not going to remember January 1, 2016 through March, whatever, 2016. It's going to remember current quarter. And so if I run it in the third quarter, it's going to have the right dates for that. Chart of accounts list, we've added the ability to include or exclude inactive accounts. Not a big deal, but we're covering everything. Budget reports. Added the ability to print the budget report in landscape or portrait, because sometimes portrait just didn't work for a lot of people. General ledger report, we now have the ability to clear all or select all, and we've added the ability to include or exclude any column on the report, which means, in essence, that you can now exclude the account number, the description, date, and amount columns on the report. That was not possible before. It now is, and now we have to clear all and select all when choosing those. Balance sheet. This is huge, and the same sorts of things apply to the income statement, so I'm going to tell you kind of all at once. We now, an income statement and a balance sheet have always been a, I guess, horizontal thing. You had 1 month or 1 quarter or 1 year. And maybe you had prior year, maybe you had percentages, maybe you had separate columns, but you couldn't print January, February, and March separate income statements right next to each other in columns. Now you can. Include columns for each month. Print 1/2/14 through 3/31/2014 will now print a 3-month, 3-column January, February, March income statement that you could not do before. So now you could conceivably print a pro forma type income statement that shows January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, all as separate entries, all on the same report, all has separate columns, all together. Couldn't do that before, couldn't begin to do that before. Journal report. We've improved the selection criteria, improved the ability to how we select things. We've added the ability to select up to 3 sort orders. Previously, you could only do 2. Additional sort options, additional selection criteria. I'm not going to go into a great detail on that. Portrait or landscape. That's huge for a lot of people. Backup, all GS clients are now backed up when a backup was made. It used to be that only the one that integrates with Tabs was. So if you had separate clients in GL, they didn't get backed up. Now, most people don't use the clients anymore, but I think a lot of people thought they were all getting backed up when needed a backup, and now that's going to be true. Bank account manager, new feature. We now have a bank account manager where you can go to see all your bank accounts and start a reconciliation, import bank transactions. Hold on, we'll talk about that in a second. That's down here. Or confirm those transactions and see when the last reconciliation was, what the balance is. So you can basically go to one window, look at all your accounts, see what the balance is in one window, see when the last reconciliation, last import were, what's the bank account number and the bank name, and what's the GL information. You used to have to print a report to see this. In fact, you had to go one place to reconcile. You had to go another place to see what the balance was. You had to go another place to see what the account number was. All happening here. Now this is huge right here, import bank transactions. Just like QuickBooks and just like people have been asking for a decade, maybe longer, we can now import bank transactions from your bank using the OFX, QFX, or QBO formats. Basically what happens, just like QuickBooks, for those of you that have come from QuickBooks and wondering why STI software doesn't do this, this is now the same way. You pull these bank account transactions in, you run a compare, it matches up what it can. You can automatically create new transactions in your software from the stuff that was in the bank account, but you hadn't entered yet. You can find all your discrepancies and reconcile almost instantly now using the import feature. Now, I'm really glossing over this. I'm sure that in one of our upcoming virtual user group meetings, Mary Jo will go into great detail into how this works. So, in fact, I think it's scheduled for this month's Tabs virtual user group meeting, but don't hold me on that. We'll look at that in just a second. Bank info, card info window. There's now a place where you can put your bank account information. You can tell whether or not you want to password protect the reconciliation reports and what the password should be. So you can automatically set up this information now, including the bank account number, and you can automatically tell it, if I print a reconciliation report to PDF, I need it to be password protected. Reconciliation has changed quite a bit. It's now side by side. It used to be one window, and so you had your receipts and other deposits down here, and you had your checks and other withdrawals up here, and they were all mixed together, or all in the same window, I should say. Now we have a side-by-side view. We now have the ability to specify more up front, like service charges and interest, things that weren't accessible here. They had to be separate entries before. If you had a service charge or several of them, or you had some interest, then you had to make an entry into your system. Now it can be entered as part of the reconciliation, and it will create those entries for you and consider them to be already reconciled. There's now an undue reconciliation feature that wasn't there before. It can only be done on a reconciliation performed in version 18 or later. So we can't undo a reconciliation from last July using version 17 or 16, but we can, once we start using reconcile in version 18, we can undo those reconciliations. The report writer now lets you select a year to print. It didn't do that before. Trust accounting. Some of these changes are mimicking what we've done in General Ledger. I'm going to go over them. First is not, because it's a trust-related thing. Been asking for this forever. Finally got it. Automatic trust payments from Tabs. If you're using trust accounting now and you're billing and needing to apply that trust money to those bills as they're being produced, you know that up until version 18, you had to figure out who needed to have a payment made from trust, and then you had to make those payments from trust annually. You can now set up trust accounting and Tabs in their integration to automatically, and it's done on a matter-by-matter basis, so you can have some matters that automatically pull the payments for that current month's bill from trust, and you can have other matters that do not automatically pull from trust. So I'm not going to go into great detail. This is another thing that Mary Jo or I will be going over in the Tabs3 virtual user group meeting, but that is huge. If you've ever used client funds, which is different, but sort of the same thing, you know that this functionality has been in client funds for a while, but not in trust, and now we have it in trust. Combined trust transactions, just like you do when you put 10 checks into your operating account from on the same day, and you make one deposit, but you make 10 payment entries. You've always created a deposit slip for that and been able to create a single reconcilable entry. Well, now you can do the same thing with trust. So if you make deposit payments from trust payments from 6 different people, plus you also have a couple automatic EFTs coming in or wires coming in with trust payments all on the same day, you can make those payments separately, which you always would do and always have been able to do, but now you can combine them into one single reconcilable entry so that it's much, much easier to reconcile the trust account with that happening. Bank account manager, same thing we have going in GL. We already talked about this. You can now see the balance, the date of last reconciliation, the date of last import, because now you can import transactions into trust accounting as well. It's a new feature in GL for your operating account. It's a new feature in trust for your trust accounts. Bank accounts added the ability to store the number, added the ability to password protect PDF reconciliation reports. Same thing we just talked about in GL, also being put over in trust. I will simply say, if you've used trust and you've used GL all along or for a certain period of time, you've probably noticed reconciliation is different in both of them. You've probably noticed some subtle differences between the two and how they do things accounting-wise. It's always been a pet peeve for me and Mary Jo and many of the other resellers. That is gone. Trust and GL reconcile and act exactly the same now. They both have the bank account manager. They both have the import bank transactions. They both have the same and identical reconciliation, which we now see here. Side by side, ability to do interest, ability to do service charges, side-by-side withdrawals versus deposits, same reconciliation. No longer do you have a situation where we put in trust and GL in a firm and we have to explain, well, the way you do things is different. That day is gone. Version 18 makes these things the same. Of course, we now in trust also have an undue reconciliation feature for any version 18 or later reconciliation that's done. We have this new 3-way reconciliation report, which some states require. I have not had a client tell me yet that their state requires this. We primarily work in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and we have a handful of clients in other states. We have clients in almost every state, but most of our clients are in a couple other states plus those 5, and I have not had this happen yet. But this 3-way reconciliation, I understand, I think it's Florida that is absolutely requiring it. I may be wrong about that. But this 3-way reconciliation report compares the client trust ledger, the reconciliation, and the check register to make sure that they all match. Now, we know they all match because they're all pulling from the same data, but the bar needs to, at least in the states that are requiring these, needs to have that proven to them, and that's what this 3-way reconciliation report does. We added the ability to print automatic trust payments only or pending transactions only in the check register by check number in trust. This, of course, being new to support the automatic trust payments feature. This being new just because it's cool. And we can also print receipts now from trust, just like we can print them from tabs. We have the same new ProPay replacing PayFuse integration if you're using credit card processing in trust, just like I described previously in tabs. We used to be able to purge and select which transactions to save or purge in trust. That just makes my skin crawl. Who would want to purge transactions from a trust accounting system? Won't even go there. Those features have been removed. We used to be able to allow editing of the trust account current balance. That's gone. You cannot do that. Shouldn't have been able to do that. Yeah, everything has to go in through an entry. You cannot mess with your balances in trust anymore. I'm sorry if you liked doing that before, but can't do it anymore. Cost payable, vendor information. We have some moving some figures to a vendor activity window that used to be in a separate report. We have a vendor analysis report. It is now transaction-based. Clear vendor analysis totals is discontinued. That's a period-based thing too. Having to clear the totals for January, once you printed the January report, that's a bucket thing. Now the vendor analysis report is now date-based, so there are no more buckets. You just tell it what period you want to print. Purge checks and select invoices to purge. You got to understand, tabs came from an era. Tabs was written before we had PCs. And the first PCs didn't have hard disks, many of them. I have a great story. Dan, who is now the president of STI, used to be in support. His brother Brad is the CEO, and Brad and Jerry wrote the software. In 1979, it was released. And so we used to have computers that just had disk drives. And we used to have these big 8-inch floppy disks. I love seeing on Facebook where somebody reminisces about floppies in general. Well, and then somebody else says, well, I remember 5 1/4-inch floppies. Well, I remember 8-inch floppies. And you'd have a computer with one 8-inch drive and an expansion unit with 3 other 8-inch drives. And tabs would tell you to put in 4 program disks and load the software. And then it would tell you to remove those program disks and put in the data disks. And so somebody was talking to Dan in support, and he was going through this process with them, and he said, okay, now go ahead and take the program disks out and put in the data disks and then close the door and tell me when you're done. So he heard the doors opening, the drive doors opening, and the disks sliding out and the new disks sliding in. And then the phone got put down, and you could hear footsteps, and you could hear faint rustles of his office door closing. And he came back and he said, well, I've switched to the data disks, but I don't know why you wanted me to close my door. That's a time when disk space was extremely valuable. And so having extra transactions in the accounts payable system was a problem. Having, data that took up space was a problem. Nowadays, you can go to Best Buy and buy a terabyte hard disk for $79. Data storage is no longer a problem. And that was my long way of getting to, we have removed the purge checks feature. Void posted checks no longer have to update vendor totals when you void a posted check because everything's date-based. Yay. Miscellaneous changes. Fonts can now be embedded when writing the PDF. That's very nerdy. It just means, hey, if I'm creating a PDF, I can embed the fonts into the PDF file so that when the viewer reviews it, if they don't have those exact same fonts, it'll still look the same. That's a non-nerdy way of saying that we can embed fonts in PDF files. When selecting to assign Tabs3 PracticeMaster Timekeeper in user configuration, there is no longer a limit to the number of timekeepers you can select. I should have finished reading this because I don't even know what that means. Next, report previews can be zoomed to 6,400%. So for those of you that really need something to be big when you're looking at it on the screen, it can be bigger than ever. Date range, change the allowable date range to 1970 through 2069. Don't know what it used to be, but and in PracticeMaster it's 1753 to 2199. Except for date fields that are used by both programs, and then they would have to use the tabs range. Not sure what they were before. That's interesting, but totally nerdy. Support log, we now check more things in the support log. We're keeping track of more and more things in the support log, not that you care. Renaming a contact, added the ability to optionally update the first and last name fields when renaming contacts. I don't know if you've ever renamed a contact, but that involves the full name field because the contact ID is also used to create the full name field. But maybe you knew this, maybe you didn't. That contact ID is also used to create the first and last name fields. But when you renamed, they weren't being changed. Now they are. Print setup, added portrait and landscape tab to the setup window. Help about now indicates whether the software is Platinum or Platinum SQL. Yay. I can't tell you how hard it is for me and Mary Jo and Leanne to tell whether the client's got Platinum or Platinum SQL because they never know. And now you can tell. Yay. Improved integrity checking. That's just our DFIC, not really stuff that you care about. In Platinum, we have made it easier to set up the cache in SQL. That means that people will be less inclined to pay us for 2 to 4 hours to come in and totally analyze how your data should be cached based on your data sizes. It's easier. Not going to go into great detail, but it's easier, and most of our clients can do it themselves now. Performance monitoring utilities in Platinum have been enhanced. We can now have 30 user-defined indexes and 15 in non-Platinum. It used to be less. Fee and cost entry now looks a lot like the new fee and cost entry, uses the rate from Tabs3 automatically, just like I described the changes to the PracticeMaster fee entry screen. Calendar entries now include the private checkbox in Tabs3 Connect. And text macros, there have been some changes to text macros. I'm not going to go into detail. And finally, the last nerdy change that may be significant to some people is that we can now encrypt your data if you've got Platinum SQL. So if you're in an environment where you need your data to be encrypted beyond the encryption of being in DAT files that are hard to read anyways, you can now encrypt your data so that the only people that can read it are people that are authorized to read it. Not that really anybody could read it before. A, they had to be on your system. B, they had to know where to look. C, they had to understand how the data was formatted to begin with. But now it can be encrypted. Now it can be encrypted so that even if people know what they're looking for and know exactly how to find what they're looking for and how to read it in a data format, which most people couldn't, now it can be encrypted so that even people that have that capability would have to know the key to get into your data. And there we did it, Leanne. It was 53 minutes since I turned on the phone. It's 11:54. I guess I didn't make my half hour, but that is everything to know about Tabs3, GL, AP Trust, and PracticeMaster in version 18. I know I didn't cover everything in great detail. This is the getting your first look sort of view. Be sure to watch for our VUGs, our virtual user group meetings for Tabs3 and PracticeMaster over the next couple months. They will be covering in great detail specific features that we find to be things we want to cover because we get to decide. How do you know what's going to be covered? Well, if you're not getting our emails, which, gosh, does anybody not get our emails, Leanne? I don't think so. You can go to our website, Attorney Computer Systems, see that S right there, .com. You can click on videos and up will come a description of the VUGs in general, but then the tabs, PracticeMaster and World Docs, the virtual user group meetings, our Coffee Pot webinars, which you are attending or viewing right now, Mary Jo's eBytes video series, and the Paul and Mary Jo show. All of this video content is available on our website. And if you're curious what's going to be in our next PracticeMaster virtual user group meeting, I can really point and click here. There we go. It's going to be all about version 18, just on PracticeMaster. The next one in Tabs is going to be all about version 18 in tabs. And then after that, we'll get into breaking it down by specific topic. For instance, I know that the import bank transactions will be covered in the tabs virtual user group meeting. I know that the new fee entry capabilities in PracticeMaster will be covered in the PracticeMaster virtual user group meeting. But this is where you can see what's coming up. It's where you can click to register. It's where you can scroll down and view video of prior meetings. And it's also where you can search and say things like version 18 and see what we've got that covers version 18. Okay, so that's it. One more thing. How do you get it? You will be notified via email when it's available to you. If you must have it now, you can email me, paul.purdue, like the school, not the chicken. Purdue Chicken, by the way, is P-E-R. Purdue University is P-U-R-D-U-E. paul.purdue@attorneycomputersystems.com. And I will get it set for you to get it as soon as possible. Otherwise, just wait for the email from STI. They do roll this out in a kind of staggered way so that they don't overwhelm their ability to provide some of the best support in the industry, the best support in the industry, some of the best support in the world computer-wise. So if you need it right away because one of these features is just so important to you, you can't wait, just let me know. Otherwise, wait for the email from STI, and that will include instructions on how to get it. Everybody have a good day, rest of the month, and we will see you next month when we talk probably about something else that's new in version 18. Thanks much, everybody. Goodbye.